Hi, welcome back to Section 3. I hope you've enjoyed the first two sections. Now we're going to talk about how to handle violations.
Now that sounds like an exciting topic. How did that get into building community spirit? You know, it's one of those things whenever you get to enforcement, but it is an important part of how people feel about their community.
It is, and if people feel like they've been abused or they've been received a violation and error, they're not going to have a lot of community spirit, are they?
No.
So there's a way to go about doing it. Always be positive and make sure that when people call you, if they call you a board member or they call the manager, that the manager is also responsive to these homeowners and people who receive violation letters. You know, the worst thing in the world is you open up, I got a violation letter, I got to tell you the story.
Yeah.
I live on a lake, and the manager was inspecting our backyards because our backyards get inspected. And it was spring, and the manager sent us a violation letter because we had weeds growing in our back planter. They were ranunculus and bearded irises, which all of you could see was their little heads. Now, the manager was not an expert on horticulture. Mm-hmm. So when the irises, the bearded irises, the ranunculus were in bloom, we took a picture of them. We said, these are our beautiful weeds. Now, I wasn't angry. I understood what happened. But what did I do? I called the manager and said, look, these are our spring color, and they'll be up in a few weeks. And she said, oh, okay, I didn't know that. Rather than getting angry and saying, I got this letter and this is terrible. There's homeowners, they have a responsibility too. They really, if you always act angrily first, you're not going to get a good outcome. Yeah. And that doesn't build community spirit.
Now, I have a good one too, and again, I have a sense of humor, so I take it this way, but when you're president of an HOA, isn't it fun to write in that they have a violation on their property, see? And so when I got this letter, apparently one of the homeowners drove, I live in a corner, around the corner of the house. And I have a very large tree on the corner of my property. And one branch was kind of hanging down because of the weight, and you couldn't see the street sign. So he put me in for a violation until I cut my branch so that he could see the sign. But he had great joy in doing it, and I laughed about it. I didn't know, of course, who it was until the person actually said, well, I was the one that did that. And I said, yeah, that's fine. I'm glad. I said, now I can say to all the other homeowners, you're not the only ones that get violations. The board president got one, and you know what? I complied.
Well, I can tell you, I have a story for you, and really and truly, when you're a board member, people look at you differently. They really do. We got a new puppy several years ago, a Springer Spaniel, who got car sick. So what I did was I put her in the car, and I was driving up and down the street. And one of my neighbors says, oh, you're inspecting my yard. I said, no, actually, I'm not. I'm trying to get the dog used to the car because we're going to go to California, and I don't want the dog to. And they go, yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Just then I opened the car. The dog got out of the car, and the dog went, bleh. Now
on their property, of course.
But really and truly, looking at it from their eyes, I understood what they thought I was doing. They thought I was driving up trying to find violations, which I was really trying to get the dog used to the car.
Yeah. And
so there can be a lot of misperceptions.
You're making a point, and I think it's a really important point, and that is because we're looked at differently as board members, it's really good to have a sense of humor and to be, in compliance. And if somebody, writes a violation, it's not the end of the world. We know that. We know what's going to happen, and we know that we're going to comply. And all you do is you become a good example of what it is to handle appropriately a violation and go through the process. And I always find it fascinating in meetings where I can say, I know what to do. I know what the process is, you know? And remember the most important thing. Every HOA should always be focusing on compliance, not the fine.
Exactly.
Fines are negative. That gets out into the community. So what you want is whatever the violation is corrected. That's the most important. And that is a way of building our community spirit.
Exactly. We had two ladies that lived in our community. It's kind of a funny story, actually. And the one woman would get written up for her garbage can in front of her house on a non-collection day. She says, I don't even have a trash can. I have a little bag. I live by myself. So really, until we thought, well, this is just crazy. We found out that the woman next door, for some reason, didn't like this lady, and when she knew the inspector was coming by, she'd take the trash can. Now, this is not building good community spirit. So what we did, we found out what happened. We invited both the ladies in, and we said, look, why don't you go to Starbucks and figure this out, and now they go play bingo together all
Isn't
the
that
time.
great?
So
Isn't
now
that
they're
great?
friends, they volunteer
That's
on
wonderful.
communities, and a problem was alleviated.
I'm going to have to bring up a delicate problem that almost every HOA has to deal with, and it has to do with pets. You know how people are so locked into their pets? For some people, a pet is like a child, and it's really important to them. Well, there's two issues. One is you get the dog barking, and that issue. And the issue with the dog barking, and many times I find this is the case, the dog doesn't bark when the owner's home.
Never barks when the
Never
owner's
barks
home.
when the owner. So when you write them a letter of violation or a neighbor says something, it's always like, I don't know what you're talking about. My dog doesn't bark.
My dog never barks.
Never barks. Except when you're at work or you're out shopping or you're somewhere else, and then the dog gets lonely and starts the barking. But how you handle that is really important. Again, how do we get compliance? How do we get neighbor talking to neighbor? How do we get the owner of the dog to understand that maybe the dog is lonely? Maybe the dog has a problem when you leave the house, which is something that you don't see. And we work on that. Now, even a little more difficult, and I don't know if you have it, but we had a major problem, is no other delicate way to say this, but dog poop. You know, it's when they don't carry the bag,
Right.
they walk their dog in front of someone else's property, and the dog does their business, and they keep on walking. Well, who's responsible for cleaning up that dog poop? And the owner of the home comes out and sees it. It's very upsetting.
It is upsetting.
And what I guess we have to do is somehow, there are no bad dogs or cats or other pet. It's the owner that's not doing their responsibility.
Exactly.
And we had to have a whole campaign. We had T-shirts printed. We had everything out. I mean, it got so out of hand, okay, that actually now we do have good compliance. We did it with tongue-in-cheek. We didn't do it with heavy-handed. But again, does that build community spirit? Absolutely.
Yes, we put doggy stations up with,
Oh,
with bags,
right.
and our gardeners, our landscapers fill it up all the time. And when we see people that are using the bags, we promote it. We put it in our newsletter. Thank you for using the bags. We know you're using them because they're disappearing. And back to the dog barking thing. Really and truly, like, most dogs don't bark when the owner's home. They'll bark when the owners are gone. And maybe what you do is you have somebody in the community that knows these people and listen to see if the dog is barking or not when they're not home. And maybe something as simple as just leaving the radio on while you're not there.
Right. Yeah.
Or the television.
Well, that brings up the whole area of, neighbors that have conflict with other neighbors. And I think one of the golden rules is we as leaders, board members, community managers, whoever is involved, you do not discuss a problem about a particular homeowner to any of the other neighbors.
That doesn't build community spirit.
Oh, it doesn't at all. It can tear it apart.
It can.
And it's like World War III when somebody's accusing a neighbor of doing something.
Get the Hatfields and the McCoys.
Absolutely. And it can become a really big problem. And again, it's the way you handle the conflict. Conflict's going to be there. It happens. We're all people. We all have our own pet peeves and so forth. And it's not something that we can just deal with unless we do it in a very positive way. And talking to neighbors and trying to get people involved. I liked your example, for example, where about the trash can, the two neighbors went out to Starbucks. I think that was a great thing to get them involved.
We had another situation where the two ladies, their houses were back to back, and the new owner just put in a new light and it was shining in the other homeowner's bedroom. Rather than knocking on the door and bringing some cookies that you got from Albertsons or someplace, she called the association and said, I want you to do something about this. So what we suggested is, why don't you just go talk to your neighbor? And they became friends.
They became friends. Yeah. One of the things, and I believe this is real, a real HOA did this, they actually posted on the homeowner's door the violation letter. Can you believe that?
That's a big no-no.
It's like, okay, everybody publicly, they got a notice, and say, your dog is doing this, or, your radio's too loud, you have a noise ordinance, and so forth.
No, you never do that.
We're not out here to embarrass people.
You want compliance.
Yeah, again.
And if you do have a problem, and neighbor to neighbor, you can go to the Neighborhood Justice Center and ask for an HOA specialist, and they will be able to assist you in resolving this problem, hopefully.
Yeah, a lot of communities also have animal enforcement officers.
Animal
or
control.
Control.
Yep.
You know, you hope it doesn't get to that point, but it does take the HOA out of it. The HOA does not play the policeman.
We're not a policing
No,
organization.
we're not.
We never have
And-
been, we never will be.
And if you're going to build community spirit and a cooperation type of thing, sometimes situations can become so difficult, you got to pass them on. They've got to
Exactly.
go to other people that are in the job that can do something about it. We just don't have that authority.
We don't.
You know, we're not going into people's homes. We're not going to be involved in that. And we just have to recognize it and deal with it that way.
Exactly.
And I think that's really important. One of the other things now, let's get into a more positive nature here to end this thing. We talked a little bit about groups that have common interests and how we get, in a positive way, groups together that maybe aren't even as formal as some of them. And some of the ones that I thought about, now let's go back. I know you're going to think I'm on a theme here, but eating, again.
It's
Do you
that
know-
food thing.
Yeah, it's an eating thing. There are a lot of people who enjoy going to a restaurant. No cost to the HOA. Maybe what you do is you coordinate it by a sign-up sheet or whatever, and you put out in your newsletter that every Wednesday morning we're going out to breakfast at this particular place. We really would like you to join. Come meet some of your neighbors. And they all drive on their independently in their cars, a close restaurant, and do it. And I think that can be really positive.
And that's a great idea. There's also cooking clubs where people like to cook.
Exactly.
There's progressive dinners, which are really quite popular in a lot of neighborhoods, where you'll get a progressive dinner while each home will fix something else. Wine tasting is another thing
Yeah.
that's fun.
I have another one.
What?
A local pizza restaurant did a pizza class where they actually made the dough.
Oh, no, that would be fun.
And they all got together. They could take 15 homeowners, and it was some small charge of like $10, and you got to eat your own pizza, you know. But they learned how to make it. And they had a lot of fun, a lot of laughs doing it, and it really created bonds. Again, that concept of building the community spirit. When you do things together, where you enjoy each other, I think then it makes it a much stronger
Oh,
community.
yeah, bridge clubs, gin rummy clubs, walking, as we said before, maybe babysitting clubs. You know, there's a number of things you can do to build community spirit, and it makes better neighbors.
Yeah, I agree. So there are some things. How about some projects? You had some ideas on different projects people could do. I think it was disaster things and stuff.
Oh, a
you had
disaster
these,
plan.
Yeah, you had these ideas. They were and they're things I never heard of.
Well, having a disaster plan is a good thing. I mean, if you ever lived in Southern California or California, you know that there are earthquakes and you have to prepare for that. Nevada is seismically active. We're the third seismically active state in the union, so we probably should have some sort of disaster plan, especially if you're in a condo or a townhome, because single-family homes are a little different. They're single, but
Right.
if a townhome or a condo have an earthquake, that shakes. That could affect a lot of different people.
Right.
But really and truly, go around, make sure that your neighbors sign up for the disaster plan. If something happens, who contacts them,
Right.
who they contact. Make sure that, like my husband and I, we have our daughter's name who lives here in town in case something happens to us, so people will know how to find her and let her know that we had a problem. So I think these things are good. They help build community spirit.
Yeah.
And
Some communities have neighborhood watch.
they do. We have a neighborhood watch.
Do you?
We
Yeah.
do. We do. We have a neighborhood watch, and it was quite effective. We like it. And our neighbors would get together
Sure.
probably once a quarter with the neighborhood watch to see what we've done and what we can do.
Sure. Potlucks. I hear that
Potlucks.
all the time.
Oh, potlucks.
All the time. Potlucks or progressive dinners.
Yeah,
Even if you just do it on your block.
exactly.
Again, it builds that concept community, block by block.
Block by block.
And then ends up being a whole community being together and feeling good and having fun.
Well,
so there are all kinds of ideas that we might want to have. The other thing that I wanted to stress is the bigger HOAs have clubhouses. They've got to make them accessible.
Yes.
They've got to be a reasonably low cost if they do any add-on charges and so forth. One of the things which I thought was a really good idea is sometimes during the holidays you have family members, and some clubs, HOAs, have restrictions about family members that they have to pay a fee, anybody that's a visitor type thing. This one HOA came up with a good idea. Every year they gave 4 free passes.
Oh, that's a great
What
idea.
a positive thing. The board voted to give every home 4 free passes that they could use, any type of visitor, friend, outside the community, family members, that they could go and there was no charge.
That's a great
What a
idea.
positive thing.
It
To
is.
say, here we are, we have all these facilities, we want you to use them. Here's an idea that, if you want to bring a friend or if you want to bring your family members at holiday times, here's a way to do it and it's no cost to you.
That's a great way to build community spirit.
Yeah, you make people feel important, make them feel good about it. Well, that brings us up to our final segment, which is my favorite, by the way.
We'll be back.
Yes, we'll be back with really good ideas from real HOAs of what they did to have fun together.
Exactly.
So we'll see you for segment 4.